And white men are lovely, have built great companies. I'm not disparaging, but the reason to invest well beyond that is because it's half the population, we'll start there, and there's a whole set of opportunities that we can get to when we think bigger about how the world works and the kind of use cases and lived experience that everyone has.
The subconscious mind has been programmed since we were born. When we ran into a room and as a girl, either we greeted with "you have a cute dress," or as a boy, it's completely different from the moment we're born.
Women have come into the venture capital space in the last 10 to 15 years in mass.
My experience as a multicultural founder is I've been told that what I create is for a Black and brown community. And I'm like, wait a second, so if I was a Caucasian founder, what I create is for everybody. But because I'm a person of color, my market automatically becomes people of color. And that's another misconception that I experience.
There's a lot of space. How are you guys feeling today? Okay, it sounds like you guys are ready for brunch. We won't take too much of your time, but thank you so much for coming to hear our fantastic panel. I've actually known majority of this panel since I started in LA about 2.5 years ago. But what I would really like to start off with is actually people introducing themselves and talking about which industry you're working in and what your vision is, just to start so we can give a foundation for the audience.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you all again. My name is Natasha Pastana-Rice. I am the co-founder of Eat Virgin. It's a preventative health and wellness plant-based company. We do on-the-go power snacks and meal replacements to help prevent the chronic lifestyle cancers and diseases that kill over 7 out of 10, not in this room, but in the other room, people in this country. So if we can prevent what kills 70% of the world and 70% of the country by eating delicious, thoughtful, nutrition-crafted meals, why not? And that's what I focus on. So thank you.
Amazing. So my name is Anna Gudmundsson. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Sensate, and we're helping the world chill out. I think we all need more peace and calm in the world, and actually Sensate is a very unique product that uses infrasonic waves and sound to calm the nervous system, and it works for people that have no meditation experience, no practice, and a very, very diverse community of people who are users all over the world. And so for me, I think we're all here because we are visionaries, and in order to create a better future, we actually need to have availability to our faculties. And when we're constantly activating the stress response in our body, we're not only undermining our actually nutritious uptake and immune system, but we're actually suppressing our prefrontal cortex, which is our conscious mind, our executive functions, our problem solving, and our empathy. And so it's a very mass market root level problem solving for positive impact. Thank you.
Hi, it's nice to be here. It's hard to tell how many people are actually out there, so I'm kind of going to keep looking around. But my name is Naseem. It's nice to meet everyone. I've been in venture capital for about the last 5 years. Grew up from an angel investor into a VC, and my entire focus has always been female-founded teams, and really 2 parts. 1, investing in products, services that are really leaning into how women are spending money and the things women want to spend money on. And then 2, trying to expand that 2% of capital that goes to female founders. So I was most recently co-founder and general partner at a fund called Emmeline Ventures that was fully focused in those places across healthcare, financial services, and climate. And I am en route to a new fund in a couple weeks with a bit more of a double down just on women's health explicitly, so that we can actually grow that half of the category and get after that $1 trillion that's sitting over in women's health that we haven't unlocked yet. So it's nice to be here.
All right, good morning. So before I do my intro, big shout out to Rachel for putting together this amazing panel. And also very, very excited to just have the opportunity to join these amazing women, share what we're doing, what we're building. And on my side, I'm Adela Jamal, GP and co-founder at Milemark Capital. We're a new fund investing in early stage AI companies led by diverse teams out of innovation hubs. We are sector agnostic, but as I like to say, we are certainly focusing on sectors of significance. So think about healthcare, agriculture, fintech. And right now, I think just looking at sort of what we've built over the last 2 years and also the feedback that we're getting from other funders and founders has been incredible. My background for the last 2 decades has been in finance and tech. I've done everything from running a startup to working with VCs to working in large corporate, and I've seen sort of this shift that's happening. So sort of what we're living and what we're sort of, pushing forward, I think is not only just the best time to be doing it, but it's also the most like transparency we've ever had. And I've genuinely seen a big shift in also what's happening with our entrepreneurs and the type of support that they need. So what we're actually, pushing for and sort of, that whole, if you can see it, you can be it, is just the most important time ever. So thank you again. Excited for this panel.
I should add quickly that I have a sensate, and it's fantastic. I didn't really understand it at first, just because I don't meditate, but now I totally get it.
So do I as well. Actually, Adele, I want to go back to you. So just talking about Malmark Capital, I know you had some notable achievements. Just curious to see, how you're making impact and your approach to that, just for the audience.
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the, most important aspects of at least, how we're building and why we're building is that you hear about the diversity efforts, and a lot of people, quite frankly, don't understand what that means. And for us, it means diversity not only of teams, but also diversity of thought. And we've seen the stats. We know that diverse teams are more productive. They generate greater returns. And of course, anything that's female founder-led, I'm all about it. But the other element is that the founding team, so myself being from India originally, I'm half Indian, half American, and my other partners being from Turkey, from Ecuador, and also from the US, we are literally representing the types of founders that we're backing. And that is not your normal, partner sort of equation if you take a look at historic sort of VC compositions and teams. And the other element is that what we're seeing is that a lot of individuals are being sort of placed in VC funds to seem as though they're diverse and that they understand who they're serving, but they're not in positions of power to make voting decisions as to who they invest in, and we are. So I'm 25% owner. It's partially my company, and I am definitely voting for who I'm investing in. And so that is crucially important because that is going to dictate where we allocate capital, how we shape the future, who gets to sort of, get through the early stage, which is incredibly difficult. And at that stage, it's also all about the person and the founder. So we're really investing in the people. And so for us, just that journey and sort of bringing that, that messaging and that ribbon together, I think really sets us apart. And like I mentioned a few minutes ago, just 2 years into it, it's not only just a theory and like a hypothesis. We're hearing that, we're getting that feedback loop. And I think it's just the beginning of something much bigger than what we even imagined.
Naseem, I've known you for quite a while now, and when I first met you, it was really in the women's healthcare space. But same question: what's your approach to this, especially as you're shifting now, but also any kind of key impact examples that you've made?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's a couple of. So we'll start with the financial side of things, right? The reason to invest in founders that are not white men. White men are lovely, have built great companies. I'm not disparaging. But the reason to invest well beyond that is because it's half the population. We'll start there. And there's a whole set of opportunities that we can get to when we think bigger about how the world works and the kind of use cases and lived experience that everyone has. And so if you think about companies like Uber and Airbnb and the great companies, and we now use them, and it's not just that we use those companies, it's that we've learned behaviors from those companies. And so we will get into someone's car who we don't know, and they'll take us from point A to point B. Before Uber, we would never do that. You're not getting into some random person's car. We will stay in somebody's home who we don't know and rent a room, and we feel completely safe doing that. We would have never done that before, right? But when you think about those two companies, they're great, but they've had pretty significant safety problems, both of them. And you have to think about they're male-founded companies with male VCs, and the notion of safety didn't come up. If there had been one woman in the build room or in the invest room, the notion of safety would have come up. And so it's that that's the impact layer that we have to get after when we put more diversity in the rooms of these companies, is that we'll actually understand the lived experience of everyone who might interact with that product or that service. And so that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for. The other, if I go back to women's health, is that the healthcare system actually doesn't understand women at all, like in the least. We're just small men, there's no data, right? Women weren't included in clinical trials until 1993. 1993, right? It wasn't that long
96,
ago.
really. Technically 93, but it took them a few years to actually get us in.
No, that's right. Well, even so, women are only participating, like we're 25% of the participation in clinical trials, and most of those trials are still focused on fertility. So we're still leaving the vast part of women's lived experience out of the data problem. And so when you go to your doctor and something feels wrong and they tell you, oh, you'll be fine, and you think you're being gaslit, you are, but they just don't know, right? So part of what I like to focus on is how are we going to build the data sets we need to actually resolve and address women's health in a way that's much more holistic and much smarter. Physiology is different, and a lot of preclinical trial work actually gets done on mice, and they will run drug tests on female mice. Female mice don't menstruate. And so you're not getting the right kind of response because you're not getting the hormone cycles that come with what happens to all of us. And so we have to resolve those problems, but we have to do that with founders who have that lived experience. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Anna, as a female founder, and you've been in the game for about 5 years now, is that correct? How has your approach been with Sense8 and even externally to providing more chill in the world?
On the impact side, there are kind of two parts. One, which is the actual product. And there are a few of we get love stories every day, but also just the whole baseline of how stress undermines our ability to look after relevant interests. And we recently had a trauma-informed learning center with mainly women from disadvantaged groups that had some level of trauma, and Sense8 really helped them to get through the training. We also had one lady and her son that were unhoused at the beginning and who are now living in an apartment and are now trained to be a nurse and go into the workplace. So I think that is such an important part of my why. And really the fact that at all levels, we looked at during the pandemic, how irrational we were at all levels, shouting at our neighbors, some crazy bureaucracy, whatever. So it says if we don't have a good vagal nerve tone, which is actually meaning stress resiliency, it's very hard to function. And then there is me as a CEO. It's not my first CEO role, and how we change. And I see also how important role models are. I remember I was in the leadership team of a mid-sized company, and there were hundreds of people there. And when I left, several women came up and say, "Oh, it's so sad you're leaving. We really enjoyed having you on the leadership team," and I'd never met them. And also with the level of consciousness that we need to bring to things, my team has been more diverse on every level, racial, age, gender, everything. And I think that in terms of changing things, it's not actually okay to just keep doing what we're doing. If we're not injecting energy and effort to make a difference, we are part of the problem. So having lived in 6 countries, I have a quite big cultural perspective on all of these aspects, including having lived in an African village carrying water home on my head. So a quite wide range of experiences. And so moving to the US, I actually found it a lot more segregated than I had expected. And being originally from Sweden, to get my weird accent out of the way, I also felt I actually need to educate myself, because the racial issues here are very different to Sweden, where we imported racism instead of kind of having it as core part of our culture. So then, yes, I have to read some books. I have to educate myself. I have to make an extra effort. I have to tell recruiters to make more of an effort. And then the other part is very much the self-awareness, because we don't often think about why is it that there's so much less invested in female founders. It's not the statistics. of their outcome or performance. And it is, if we don't understand where thoughts come from. Thoughts come into our head from where? From our subconscious mind. The subconscious mind has been programmed since we were born. When we ran into a room and as a girl, either we greeted with, you have a cute dress, or as a boy, it's completely different from the moment we're born. I'm 47 years old, so some of the indoctrination that I had growing up was like Dallas and Dynasty and these series. It's basically all white people, power-hungry men that are very non-emotional, kind of dysfunctional, and then very bitchy, undermining, jealous women, right? So we have to understand that if we don't understand our own subconscious, if we don't educate ourselves, if we don't practice in every moment to shift how we're thinking about stuff in general, whatever biases we might have a negativity bias, then these things don't really change. So I try to have a culture that cultivates not just professional growth, but also personal growth, including meditation, managing how we feel and all of that. And I think that is huge because the workspace is really a place where we can learn to think differently about these things.
Talking about thinking differently and getting a little bit more spicy here. I think all of us have been in the startup and VC world enough to know there's a lot of misconceptions about women, whatever their role is. And so I'm all about the reframe. Natasha, I'm curious to see if there's a top misconception that you want reframed about women.
That's a great question. I would say from my experience as a founder, raising capital and working from angel investors as well as taking VC meetings, I'm really cognizant that people tend to invest in people that look like them, like their family, like their nephew, like their kids, like their neighbors. And speaking, I haven't lived in 6 countries, but I probably have more than 6 countries in my bloodline. But, being someone who's very racially ambiguous, my mother's from Fiji, she's Indian, my dad's from Guyana, I was born and raised in Australia. And coming to the States, and even in, Australian racism is very much in your face, American racism is kind of more undertone and in the decisions that get provided to you. And even when it comes to being a female in the industry, I've had meetings where it seemingly has gone really well. And then the moment my husband leaves the room, the tone changes. The opportunity is there if I'm willing to do certain things, which I never will and never have. And then there's like all this time just gone down the drain because certain people use their position of power to get things that they want on a level of greed or just possession, correct? So the other aspect is the things that are important to us as women, us as nurturers and providers in a different sense of the traditional male providers. We also do provide very much. When we're in these rooms and we're sitting in these meetings, the people who are on the other side of the room, their role is completely different. Most men go to work, most women leave their career after they have children. Most men are at work and out of the home more than women, so women end up becoming the purchasing power in the home. So even if you're looking at consumer packaged goods companies, what is going to be more valuable to a man or to a woman investor? So my reframe would be, just because it doesn't suit you as a consumer, it doesn't mean that there's no consumer base for you. And that's not just for, male investors, but it's also for investors of different races. Like my experience as a multicultural founder is I've been told that what I create is for a Black and brown community. And I'm like, wait a second. So if I was a Caucasian founder, what I create is for everybody. But because I'm a person of color, my market automatically becomes people of color. And that's another misconception that I experience. So even if you want to go down that rabbit hole, as a woman of color, if we want to say that, people of color in this country are a minority or don't have very much money, quote, or don't care about their health, quote, or don't want to be healthy, quote, these are things that have been told to me, right? People of color don't want these things. Let's just go with that. The minority in this country that has the most money are, I'm half Indian, you're half Indian, I don't know, you look Indian to me, right? We have the most money and we're a minority. So let's just negate that. And then if we go to, it's a very small market as people of color. And it's like, well, because you live in a fish pond and I live in the ocean. And when we zoom out, look at the world, people of color run the world. People of color contribute to, 70, 80% of the world. So I would say that we are the majority. We're the global majority and we're becoming the domestic majority if we are not already. So it's a fantastic market. So even if they want to be biased, and it's not purpose, it's not intentional, no one's innately evil. I don't think we're out here trying to be malicious. I believe nepotism is just above racism and classism, and we just want to take care of people who look like us. But ultimately, if one was to step out and be like, let me invest beyond what I like and what I look like and who I'm comfortable with, and look at the global market, there is so much untapped money that is just sitting there. And there's so many consumers that look like a variation of all of us all around the world that are like, where is the product and service that talks to me? And that's why I do what I do, and that's why we're here, because we want to change that so we can drive those funds to those communities and to those founders like us.
That's a lot to think about. Nassim, thoughts?
So many thoughts. No, I agree with all of that. It's a little, I'll kind of extend the reframe question. There's a couple of things. One, there is the stories I've heard from female founders on the kinds of questions that they get when they're in a pitch meeting would blow your mind. And it'll be little things like, well, they're not little. It will be things like one founder had an investor ask her, because they saw her engagement ring, and said, so when are you planning to get married? And so what happens to the business when you decide to have kids? And she was great about it. You get taken aback by questions like that, because we absolutely don't ask men those questions because men don't wear engagement rings. Societal problem. And so they don't get those questions. And so she said, well, I'm going to run my company. Like, I actually don't think those questions are appropriate. We're here to talk about my business. And ultimately, she learned a lot about the kind of investor that she wants, because she doesn't want that check, right? Because that person is going to be worried about her ability to multitask, when you could argue that women are probably the best multitaskers in the world because we're otherwise doing all the stuff at home anyway, right? And so those reframes, like, we have to stop asking women prevention questions and really start to ask them promotion questions. It's not like, let's worry about what about. Let's go, how big is the business going to be? How much could it scale? How much money could it make? Tell me the vision of what you're after. And we have to collectively, as a VC industry, get better at asking questions to every founder we meet and check our unconscious bias, because it happens a lot.
Well, LBS did a study on this, right? So this isn't just an anecdotal thing. This research has been done.
Absolutely, no, 100%. There's data to support the difference in questions that women get versus men when they walk into a pitch meeting. And there's also been studies done where the same pitch document, male founder, female founder, they walk into 2 different meetings with VCs, and the male founder will walk out with the check and the female founder doesn't. And it's been tested. So those kinds of things have to shift. The other thing I'll say, which is more to the female founders that I work with and any that are in the room, is that because we're growing into an ecosystem that already exists, right? It's not as if the ecosystem worked and then it broke and we're fixing it. Women have come into the venture capital space in the last 10 to 15 years in mass, right? And so we're literally pushing a rock uphill. So 2 things I tell everybody is you have to lead with numbers. You have to. And what I will see very often is that we as women will storytell in a different way. We lead with empathy. We might lead with pain. We might lead with the use case or the need we're solving for. And 5 pages in, we get to the numbers. You've got to lead with the money. Explain the pain later, because your end game is the check, right? Your end game is not for that person to understand the pain or empathize with the story. Your end game is the check. So start with the money and then get us into the other stuff. The second thing, and this is maybe contrarian, maybe not, but I've also heard lots of stories from female founders about how someone said, God, if you took a man into that meeting, you would get that money. And you bristle a little bit because you're like, I don't want to have to do that. I want someone to give me a check because it's me. And what I tell them is you know what? Again, your end game is the check. If you have a hilariously funny head of sales who happens to be a striking white guy, take him to the meeting, get the check, come home and keep building your business, right? Like, let's not, until we burn it down and build it again, like, work the system for what you need, and then we will leave me to fix the system, you go get the capital. And that's how we're gonna change it, right? So just take him to the meeting and get the money.
Okay, so as we're running out of time, we're going to quickly flip the script a little bit to Adele. So what do you think is a top thing women need to thrive in this space and to push the future?
I love that question. I was hoping we'd get to that because I actually want to share very honestly also what I'm seeing, right? So Nassim has dropped some amazing gems here, and I agree with all of that. I'd also say that just from what I've been watching like over the last 2 decades, and then also just from like the funding perspective over the last 24 months, I'm seeing women actually get out there. I love it because they're leaning into the numbers, but I'm also seeing them build with conviction and proximity to the problem, which is incredible. And the reason that's important is because they are able to sort of define, they're able to sort of, show the journey, sort of get into the real like metrics and details of like the why and the how. And I never see that in other founders. And I'm just being very honest. I think that their journey, and especially because of, let's say, historically what they're sacrificing, right? Like if we as women are going to be historically the caregivers and the caretakers and doing 100 things and multitasking, and then you're stopping all of that, you're going, let's say, a more traditional corporate or whatever career, to then go and branch out and to build something. You're doing it because you really believe in what you're building, and you're going to pivot if you need to, but you're not going to throw in the towel. And that is literally what I have seen. And I think right now our portfolio is like 80% women-led or co-founder-led. And that type of founder, especially at the early stage, I absolutely love. And that's what I want to see more of. I want to see more women sort of getting out of like the maybe in the gray area, but then like going head on with what they believe in, and then finding other individuals to partner with to get the support. And also, guess what? Aligning with funders who are like exactly who's up here today, because like attracts like, and we're going to support them, and they need our help along the way.
Anna, what's the top thing women need to thrive in the space for the future?
Capital, mentors, role models. I think, there's a lot of things that need to happen. The awareness of, just consider where our thoughts come from. I was pretty much born to be a CTO, didn't get a developer job, although I programmed everything from ones and zeros assembler throughout, because, and this very much ties to your comments, Nassim, it's like the difference it makes when you're assumed not to know or you assume to know in your career, in getting investment is everything. And so without our own growth of awareness, things are not necessarily going to shift. I'll also bring the Swedish perspective because a lot of things seem like utopia, that it can't happen, but there is more gender balance, and you don't talk about just mothers, you talk about parents. And having kids is something that the mom typically takes the first couple of months off or a few months off, and then the dad takes some time off. And once that gender difference disappeared, the problems kind of disappeared. So I spoke, and I haven't lived in Sweden for over 20 years, and I spoke with a friend of mine, and I actually asked, like, what are you, very senior, like, what are you thinking about your career, having like a second kid with such a short period of time? And she said, well, if you build a business and you can't allow for people to take some time out, you don't know how you're building the business. And, people need to go to the bathroom, so we have toilets, and people have kids, so you're set up to do that, right? So it's a very different mindset. So I think a whole reframing of just also, like, not every woman has to have kids. There are bigger role models and archetypes as well. If you look at the Indian goddesses, they were fierce, and we have so much diversity in archetypes in women as well that have fallen out of society to a large extent. But then for like, it always goes back to having kids, right? As this huge problem. It's not a problem, it's part of life, and parenting is a huge development process. When you've stayed home with kids, your ability, your breaking of your own ego, your ability to cope and multitask and act under sleep deprivation, which is great. There's so many benefits from it. So I think a whole reframing of the fabric of society and gender. Let us just be humans. Let also men just be individuals. Let women be individuals. Let's stop all this. When people of color are like this, and women are like this, and men are like this. We are all different. Us 5 here have different points of views. We're not all representing one point of view. So that for me, like being individuals and elevating our own self-awareness and actually making an effort, because that's the fun, to make a difference, to actually leave the world a better place than when we came.
Quickly to wrap up, rapid fire. So one sentence. Let's end on a positive note. Like we've talked about a lot of things, a little bit spicy, that's great, but what's the one thing that makes you excited for the future of women in this space? Natasha, kick us off. One sentence, and then we need to wrap up.
That one day when I have my daughter, she can turn on the television and see herself represented. She can go down the aisle in a grocery store, or go to a car dealership, or go to Wall Street, or go wherever she wants in the country or in the world and see herself represented. And she is not experiencing the things that we've been battling, not just today, but over the past few centuries.
Anna?
I think there are a lot of very positive change. So I am feeling very excited about this. And I think it's just bringing in some things that are seen as more feminine, but actually we all need to have in our lives. More peace, more love, more acceptance, more creativity. That's what we need in the world. So I'm hoping that we're all, of any gender or background, bring those qualities into our hearts.
See?
The level of innovation being led by diverse founders is tremendous. I am meeting no less than 10 founders a week who are doing things that you go, God, if that thing scales, we're really going to change things. And that for me is really powerful. Also, my son, who's 5, gets to hear a lot of stories about the founders I'm meeting, the things they're doing. And I'm convinced he's going to walk into kindergarten one day and say vulva to his teacher. And she's going to call me frantic, and I'm going to be excited. And so that kind of thing is fun, and I'm excited for that to happen.
Adele?
I'm excited because I really do think it's her turn. I think we've never had the level of transparency, innovation, this intersection of diversity plus tech plus finance. There's an explosion, and we're all here for it. And I'm very excited about what we can do with it.
A lot to ponder going forward. Can you just give us a round of applause for the panel? You guys have been amazing. I know we stand in between you and lunch, so hopefully please see us outside if you want to chat some more. And we always have spicy talk anyways, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.